Wishful Ignorance just became god tier. With this new strand build updated for the Edge of Fate, with the new melee buffs, you'll not only be running around like an unkillable god in master content whilst massively under the recommended power level, but you'll be insta-killing master overload champions before they can do anything, you'll be insta-killing master unstoppable champions, barrier champions, and literally all champions in the game without even stunning them, and you'll be absolutely obliterating all bosses in the game, including raid bosses, with the most damage possible by just using melee abilities, which will have with a very high uptime to use them consistently, if not all the time. This damage dealt is not taking into consideration min-maxing the build and optimizing DPS strategies, using things like orbs with woven mail for the artifact perk buffs, or using a 1-2 punch shotgun that also got buffed to provide more melee damage. But this build literally makes you a god, and you physically cannot die if you play with the build the right way. Of course, bear in mind that these activities have rough adds and can kill you almost instantly, purely because of the modifiers and being massively under-leveled. That's just the way the game is, but by using this build and setting it up exactly the way I have it, you'll be able to kill everything first before they even look at you. So guys, if you like this one, then a rating is much appreciated, and be sure to leave a comment of what builds you're using, subscribe and share for more insane builds like this, and now let's become a melee projectile DPS god. Roll the intro. Now before we jump into the build, like every build video, I will mention that the full playlist of new and updated builds is linked down below, so when you get a moment go check it out because you might just find a new best build in there. But with this one today, we are taking the Wishful Ignorance exotic and recreating a brand new version of the previous Wishful build, which allows us to obliterate everything with strand melee projectiles and have those abilities back fairly quick, with a strong uptime. These abilities are literally melting everything, even champions that aren't even stunned, and that's purely down to a few buffs that we got this season, but also the fact that now we have armor 3.0 stats that allows us to stack up melee damage, which is easier to maintain than before. This build will most likely get nerfed heavily because of how broken it is right now, so use it while it lasts, but with the buffs that we got, we now have a 200% damage increase in total from the Frenzied Blade melee damage bonus, and also now have a 200% increase from the Flechette Storm damage. So both of these combined, and the fact that Banner of War also got a melee damage bonus increase as well, now being 100%, and melee damage across the board is just increased overall with new stats too, it makes this build not only the best Titan build in the game, but instead the best build in the entire game for ability damage right now. This build is just so stupidly OP and fun to use, since we don't even need to use weapons or rely on anything for champion stuns, so it's great when playing difficult solo content, and it's just so easy to use. Now you have to bear in mind the gameplay loop and how it makes the build so strong, in the sense of why it works and the way it works, or you might not get that damage that you should be getting. So basically you'd start by running in and getting a kill with either a sword or melee to first activate the Banner of War. Once you do that, you'll then get kills to stack up Banner of War to ×4 and constantly refresh Banner of War. Once Banner of War is at a ×4 stack, you'll then collect an orb of power and get woven mail, then run in, slide melee and spam the melee for stupidly high damage. You can use a 1-2 punch shotgun to further increase the damage if you want to, so you would just run in with a 1-2 punch, shoot and then perform the melee attack, but you won't get the 1-2 punch damage on every single shot. I believe it is just one melee projectile, so in my opinion it's just not worth using, and you're best keeping it more simple, even though 1-2 punch did get a damage buff slightly as well. The damage overall from one set of melee projectiles is equivalent to I believe 1.5 Thundercrash supers with Cuirass on, so considering this is a melee ability that we're getting back quite quickly, it is pretty busted. Not only it's great for damage, but because we have Banner of War, it's also great for overall survivability as well. Now what Banner of War does is it gives you a banner that pulses with energy that heals you and nearby allies and increases melee and sword damage. Targets defeated by you or allies charge the banner, increasing the pulsing speed. You activate this with a melee or sword attack, so using swords would be ideal with this build, but it's also great considering allies can help maintain the time effect while you're doing DPS. So it's great on raid bosses right now, as long as you can maintain that effect with adds being nearby to kill. We are combining that Banner of War aspect with the Flechette Storm aspect. What this does is that while sliding, activating your charged melee attack leaps you into the air, knocking nearby targets away and dealing damage, but you can repeatedly activate the melee to chain a bunch of projectiles that get launched at enemies. Pairing this with the Wishful Ignorance now that it got buffed makes the attacks stupidly OP, because with Wishful you gain an additional Frenzied Blade charge, and both the melee and Flechette Storm have increased damage with each strike with Banner of War returning melee energy. So you can sort of see why this build is broken when you have all of these buffs added up together, considering those buffs also got buffed. so it just stacks up that melee damage really well now. It's also worth bearing in mind that Wishful is a featured exotic, and if you combine it with other featured gear, you'll be able to get a stackable damage resistance buff up to 15% based on the tiers of those armor pieces, which is a lot of damage resist if you take into consideration the woven mail buffs that we have and other stackable resistance buffs. There are two really important things that you want to make sure that you're doing with this build. The first is to make sure that you have the Frenzied Blade on, since this is required for the build to work, which is the only melee ability available anyway as of the Edge of Fate. And the second is to make sure that you have your melee stat as high as possible, ideally 200, but anything above 150 is acceptable if you want decent enough damage. The main thing with the stat is to ensure that our cooldown is as low as possible, while also making our damage as high as possible, so you want to prioritize the melee stat, but we aren't using any armor set bonuses with this build, so feel free to use any armor of your choosing. For fragments, you want to use Thread of Generation, so dealing damage generates grenade energy, that's for your grapple, but you can swap this out if you want to. Thread of Fury, so damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy, so just make sure that when you see tangles around, either shoot them or throw them. You ideally want to throw them for other benefits. But we also have Thread of Warding, so picking up an orb of power grants woven mail, and this is important, which I'll get to in a second, but the last fragment is Thread of Transmutation, so that while woven mail is active, weapon final blows create a tangle, but also gives you a plus 10 to the melee stat. Your priority when not using melee abilities for damage is to be creating tangles, as well as orbs of power and getting woven mail, which leads to our artifact perks and the mods that play an important role. So with artifact perks, we are using Shieldcrush, so that while we have woven mail, our melee recharges faster and deals increased damage. That just helps buff the damage further. Then we have Tangled Web, so creating a tangle from adds will suspend nearby combatants. Really love this perk a lot, and it just helps to control the room more easily. But you also have this one here, so defeating targets has a chance to create an elemental pickup, that being the tangle. Refreshing Threads, so picking up a tangle will grant ability energy to the one that needs it most. Elemental Benevolence, so giving allies a buff grants class ability energy. And Tightly Woven, so while woven mail is active, we get increased class and grenade stats. So with all these artifact perks in combination with our subclass aspects, the fragments and the exotic, we'll not only have increased damage and survivability, but we'll have these abilities back a lot faster than normal, and it just overall makes the build more balanced in every other area, while making the melee stupidly strong at the same time. When it comes to mods though, I would prioritise things that would generate orbs of power, so that being things like a weapon cipher mod in the helmet, or a heavy handed in the arms for orbs on melee kills, but also having mods that help get the melee back quicker by using those orbs that we generate. So it's not only benefiting our artifact, but it's benefiting the cooldowns as well, which really just makes the build even stronger than it already is. So overall with this build, it's not one of the best Titan builds, it is the best Titan build in the game right now, for the Strand subclass in Destiny 2 this season, for Season Reclamation or the Edge of Fate. It's probably going to get nerfed at some point since it is so busted and literally melts bosses when it technically shouldn't be doing that, at least on the level it does. But it is a busted build to use right now for all endgame content that you might be struggling with, either solo or as a team, and definitely one that you should get set up. But if this isn't the build for you, then you can find all my other top builds in the playlist down below, or over on my Mobalytics page. For now guys, give this one a try, go check out those other builds I have, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care guys.